The risk of trusting your inner voice in a loud world. Carl Jung. What if the most profound wisdom you'll ever encounter resides not in the clamor of the external world, nor in the pronouncements of authority, but in the quiet, often disregarded whisper of your own inner voice? We live in an age of unprecedented noise. Information bombards us from every screen, every conversation, every advertisement. Opinions are shouted, judgments are swift, and conformity is often rewarded with a fleeting sense of belonging. In this cacophony, it's remarkably easy to lose touch with the subtler currents of our own being. We learn to prioritize external validation, to seek answers in algorithms and experts, to measure our worth against the curated realities of others. Yet, beneath this surface of manufactured consensus and relentless external feedback, there exists a deeper, more authentic source of guidance, our own psyche, our own intuition, our own unique way of experiencing and understanding the world. This journey is about exploring that inner landscape, about understanding the courageous act of trusting that nascent inner voice, even when it contradicts the prevailing chorus. It's about what happens when we dare to listen to ourselves, to heed the nudges, the hunches, the persistent feelings that arise from within, especially when the world outside is screaming a different message. We'll delve into the profound insights of Carl Jung, not just as an academic exercise, but as a practical map for navigating the often treacherous terrain between our inner truth and the demands of the outer world. This is not about rejecting external wisdom, but about integrating it with our own internal compass, about finding a way to stand firm in our own perception without becoming isolated or arrogant. It's about the delicate yet vital dance between self and society, between the known and the unknown, between the loud world and the quiet voice that calls us toward our own becoming. We are often taught to be skeptical of our own feelings, to dismiss them as irrational or inconvenient. We are encouraged to follow the path that seems most trodden, most accepted, most sensible according to the collective mind. But what if that very skepticism, that very adherence to the external, is what keeps us from discovering our most authentic selves, from living lives that are truly our own? This exploration will guide us through the challenges and the immense rewards of cultivating a relationship with that inner voice. A voice that, though sometimes faint, holds the keys to our unique purpose and deepest fulfillment. It's a call to courage, a call to introspection, and ultimately, a call to trust the unseen architect of our own souls. We will begin by understanding what this inner voice truly is, not as a mystical entity, but as the integrated expression of our unconscious and conscious selves, a product of our unique life experiences, our inherited predispositions, and our deepest needs. The risk lies in the vulnerability of stepping away from the crowd, from the safety of the familiar, and daring to chart a course guided by an internal map that only we can read. This is the essence of the journey we are about to embark upon, the essence of Carl Jung's exploration of the inner voice, particularly in the context of a world saturated with external noise, lies in his concept of the self, not merely the ego or personality we present to the world, but the totality of our psyche, encompassing both the conscious and the unconscious. This inner voice, therefore, is not a capricious whim or a fleeting emotion, but rather the subtle, often symbolic language of this deeper, unified self-seeking expression and integration. It's the manifestation of our innate drive towards wholeness, a fundamental psychic imperative that guides us toward realizing our unique potential. To trust this voice is to engage in a profound dialogue with the self, a process Jung termed individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who we are meant to be, distinct and whole. This inner guidance system operates through symbols, archetypes, and a peculiar kind of knowing that transcends rational analysis. It might appear as a persistent feeling that a certain path is wrong, even if logically sound, or a sudden inspiration that seems to come from nowhere, yet resonates deeply with our core being. Building upon this understanding, we can see that the loud world actively works against this process of individuation by promoting a collective consciousness that often suppresses individual divergence. Societal norms, cultural expectations, and even the relentless pursuit of external success can create a powerful psychic pressure to conform, to silence the unique signals from our inner world. Consider the experience of a young artist who feels an undeniable pull towards a less conventional, more abstract style, yet is constantly bombarded with messages from art critics, galleries, and even well-meaning family that emphasize marketability and adherence to established trends. Their inner voice whispers of a deeper aesthetic truth, a personal vision that feels vital, but the external noise shouts about practicality, about fitting in, about what is deemed good by external standards. This creates an internal conflict, a tension between the authentic creative impulse and the pressure to conform, a tension that can lead to a stifling of the artist's true potential if the external voice is allowed to dominate. Furthermore, the risk of trusting this inner voice is amplified by the fact that its language is often ambiguous and requires careful interpretation. Unlike a direct command, the inner voice communicates through metaphors, dreams, and intuitive flashes. This necessitates a willingness to engage in introspection, to develop an awareness of our own symbolic language, and to cultivate patience in understanding its messages. It's akin to learning a foreign language. Initially, it's confusing and requires dedicated effort to decipher. For instance, a persistent feeling of unease about a particular business partnership, even when all the financial projections seem favorable, might be the inner voice signaling a misalignment of values or an unconscious perception of dishonesty. However, without the practice of listening and interpreting these subtle cues, one might dismiss the feeling as mere anxiety, a product of overthinking, and proceed with the partnership, only to face unforeseen difficulties later. Consequently, the act of trusting one's inner voice is not a passive surrender, but an active engagement with the deeper layers of one's psyche. It involves a courageous willingness to question external authorities, not out of defiance, but out of a commitment to one's own truth. This means discerning when external advice is genuinely helpful and when it serves to override our own inner wisdom. For example, a student might receive conflicting career advice from parents, teachers, and professional mentors. While all might offer valid perspectives based on their own experiences and the prevailing societal values, the student's inner voice might be nudging them towards a path that seems less conventional but feels intrinsically right. The challenge lies in sifting through this external advice, acknowledging its merits, but ultimately anchoring the decision in the resonance felt within. Another crucial layer is the potential for misinterpreting the inner voice. It's important to distinguish between genuine psychic guidance and the ego's desires, fears, or wishful thinking. This requires a degree of self-honesty and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself. The inner voice of the self is generally directed towards growth and integration, whereas the ego's impulses can be self-serving or rooted in insecurity. For instance, a desire for a promotion that stems from a genuine belief in one's capabilities and a desire to contribute more significantly to an organization is likely aligned with the inner voice. Conversely, a similar desire driven by envy or a desperate need for external validation might be an egoistic impulse masquerading as inner guidance. Distinguishing between these requires a cultivated inner discernment, a practice of observing the motivations behind one's desires and impulses with an honest and critical eye. This nuanced understanding is key to navigating the risk effectively. Shifting focus from the inherent nature of the inner voice to the external pressures that seek to drown it out, we find that societal expectations often operate not through overt censorship, but through a more insidious form of psychic suggestion. Think of the pervasive cultural narrative that equates success with outward markers: a certain job title, a particular income bracket, a specific lifestyle. This narrative, endlessly reinforced through media and social discourse, can subtly condition individuals to believe that their internal compass is flawed if it points away from these universally accepted benchmarks. For example, a person might feel a deep, quiet satisfaction in a vocation that offers little financial reward or public acclaim, such as tending a small community garden or dedicating time to local historical preservation. Yet, when faced with relatives who inquire, "When are you going to get a real job?" or friends who boast of their promotions and stock auctions, that inner sense of fulfillment can begin to erode. The external world, in its relentless pursuit of quantifiable achievement, can make one doubt the validity of an inner sense of purpose that doesn't align with its metrics. This creates a dilemma: to honor the quiet joy derived from a meaningful but uncelebrated activity, or to chase the external validation offered by a more conventionally recognized path, potentially at the cost of one's inner peace. Furthermore, the modern emphasis on radical transparency and constant self-disclosure can paradoxically make it harder to connect with our true inner voice. When our personal lives are curated for public consumption, and every thought or feeling is potentially subject to immediate commentary and judgment, there's a natural inclination to present a polished, agreeable version of ourselves. This performance can inadvertently create a barrier between our authentic inner experience and the external persona. Consider the influencer who feels a pang of existential doubt about the superficiality of their content, but, fearing a loss of followers and brand partnerships, instead posts an overly enthusiastic video about their latest product endorsement. The internal whisper of unease is silenced by the roar of perceived necessity for maintaining an image. This is not about dishonesty in a malicious sense, but a survival mechanism in a world that often conflates authenticity with a lack of boundaries and a constant stream of unfiltered vulnerability, which can be equally damaging. The challenge also lies in the very nature of intuition, which often manifests as a feeling or a subtle knowing rather than a fully articulated argument. This can be particularly difficult to trust when faced with persuasive, logically constructed arguments from others. Imagine someone feeling an intuitive no to a proposal that, on paper, appears to be a fantastic opportunity, complete with compelling statistics and expert testimonials. The external voice, armed with data and reason, can easily overwhelm the internal, less defined sensing. The individual might then second-guess their intuition, labeling it as irrational fear or a lack of understanding, and proceed with the proposal. Later, they might discover that their initial, unarticulated apprehension was indeed a valid premonition, perhaps related to subtle interpersonal dynamics or unforeseen ethical considerations that the data failed to capture. This highlights the courage required to honor a knowing that lacks external corroboration, a leap of faith into the realm of subjective experience. Moreover, the speed at which information travels and opinions are formed in our contemporary world can leave little room for the contemplative pause necessary to discern the inner voice. Before a subtle intuition can even be registered, a torrent of reactions, counterarguments, and external analyses can flood the mind. For instance, upon hearing a controversial piece of news, one might feel a nascent moral objection, a quiet discomfort with the implications. However, before this feeling can be properly examined, social media feeds are already alive with polarized opinions, fact checks, and heated debates. The individual's own nascent moral response can be swept away in the ensuing digital storm, replaced by the more readily available, externally generated viewpoints. This constant barrage makes it increasingly difficult to cultivate the inner quietude needed to hear and interpret one's own authentic response, leading to a passive absorption of prevailing sentiments rather than an active formulation of personal conviction. The very act of cultivating an inner voice, especially when it deviates from the collective hum, often necessitates a conscious withdrawal from the pervasive external dialogue. This isn't about isolation, but about creating a deliberate space for self-attunement, a sanctuary where subtler psychic signals can be perceived and honored. Consider the practice of forest bathing or mindful walking. These are not merely leisure activities, but potent techniques for recalibrating our internal frequency. They offer a counterpoint to the often frantic pace of modern life, allowing the mind to quiet its incessant chatter and become receptive to deeper insights. For instance, someone grappling with a significant life decision might find that spending an hour in nature, away from screens and urgent demands, allows a previously ignored intuitive nudge to surface with clarity. This quiet observation of natural processes, the slow growth of a tree, the patient flow of a river, can mirror the kind of deliberate, unfolding wisdom that our inner voice often embodies. The risk here is the perceived loss of productivity or the social stigma attached to appearing disengaged from the constant flow of external activity. Yet, this intentional disengagement is precisely what makes genuine inner listening possible, transforming a potentially isolating experience into a profound act of self-preservation and discovery. Furthermore, the modern marketplace of ideas, amplified by digital platforms, often prioritizes novelty and immediate impact over enduring truth or personal resonance. This can lead to a phenomenon where individuals adopt opinions or adopt causes not through deep conviction, but through a process of psychic contagion, mirroring the loudest or most fashionable voices online. The inner voice, in contrast, often speaks with a quieter, more persistent tone, rooted in personal experience and deeply held values. Imagine a situation where a public figure expresses a controversial opinion that is widely condemned. An individual might feel a nascent discomfort with the vehemence of the public outcry, sensing a nuance or a potential counter-argument that is being overlooked. However, the overwhelming pressure to align with the dominant sentiment can stifle this nascent critical thought. The risk is not in agreeing with the public sentiment, but in failing to engage with one's own authentic response, thereby outsourcing one's critical faculties and diminishing the capacity for independent moral reasoning. This requires a discerning eye, an ability to differentiate between genuine ethical consensus and the fleeting tides of public opinion, to recognize when the external clamor might be drowning out a more profound, albeit less popular, truth. Another facet of this challenge is the subtle way in which our own internal biases can mimic the external noise, creating a feedback loop that further obscures the inner voice. We may unconsciously seek out information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or gravitate towards social circles that echo our own perspectives. This can create an echo chamber, not just of external opinions, but of our own internalized assumptions, making it difficult to distinguish genuine intuitive guidance from the reinforcement of our own limited viewpoints. For example, someone might have a deeply ingrained belief about their own inadequacy, and whenever a challenging opportunity arises, their inner voice immediately whispers, "You're not good enough." This isn't the authentic voice of the self guiding towards growth, but rather the internalized criticism of past experiences or external conditioning. The risk here is mistaking self-doubt for genuine inner wisdom, leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy of missed opportunities. Recognizing this requires a rigorous form of self-inquiry, a willingness to question the very foundations of one's own perceived limitations, and to explore whether these internal pronouncements stem from authentic insight or from ingrained patterns of self-criticism. It's about developing an internal discernment that can differentiate between the authentic call of the soul and the echoes of past wounds or societal conditioning. Moreover, the very concept of trust in the context of the inner voice implies a relationship built on consistent attention and a willingness to act, even in the face of uncertainty. This isn't a passive waiting for divine revelation, but an active engagement with one's own psychic landscape. Think of learning to ride a bicycle. Initially, there's wobbling, fear, and a reliance on external support. Gradually, through practice, and a willingness to fall and get back up, one develops an internal sense of balance and an intuitive understanding of how to steer. Similarly, trusting the inner voice is a skill cultivated through repeated practice. A musician might feel an intuitive impulse to alter a melody, to deviate from the written score. If they dismiss this impulse as mere deviation, they miss an opportunity for creative breakthrough. If, however, they tentatively explore the altered melody, listening to its resonance and impact, they begin to build trust in their own musical intuition. The risk, of course, is that some intuitive impulses might lead to less than ideal outcomes, but the greater risk lies in the atrophy of this vital inner faculty through disuse, leading to a life lived perpetually on the periphery of one's own potential. This gradual building of confidence, this iterative process of listening, acting, and learning, is the very foundation of a robust inner compass. The contemporary landscape, with its relentless demand for self-optimization and constant self-improvement, often frames our inner voice as yet another tool to be honed for external gain. We are encouraged to lean in, to hack our productivity, to monetize our passions, all under the guise of self-actualization. This instrumentalization of our inner world can subtly distort the nature of our inner guidance, transforming it from a compass pointing toward authenticity into a sophisticated engine for achieving external objectives. Consider the burgeoning industry of life coaching, where the promise is often to unlock one's true potential, to achieve greater success, wealth, or recognition. While many coaches offer valuable support, the underlying message can inadvertently suggest that the inner voice is merely a means to an end, a resource to be managed for maximum output. Consequently, an individual might experience a deep-seated yearning for a slower, more contemplative existence, yet interpret their inner voice not as a genuine call to simplify, but as a sign of insufficient ambition, a personal failing to be fixed through more rigorous self-discipline or the adoption of new productivity techniques. This creates a profound dissonance, where the authentic signal from within is misinterpreted as a deviation from a prescribed path of external achievement. Furthermore, the pervasive culture of comparison, fueled by social media and the constant visibility of others' curated lives, can lead to a distorted perception of what constitutes a successful inner dialogue. When we see others seemingly effortlessly navigating their lives with apparent confidence and clarity, it's easy to assume that their inner voice is more authoritative or reliable than our own, especially when our own inner pronouncements are tinged with doubt or uncertainty. This is particularly evident in moments of personal crisis or significant life transitions. For example, someone facing a career change might observe peers who appear to have their paths clearly mapped out, their decisions confidently articulated. This external observation can amplify any internal hesitation, leading the individual to believe their own inner voice is inadequate or even misleading, simply because it doesn't project the same outward certainty. They might then seek external validation or advice, not to gain perspective, but to silence the perceived inadequacy of their own internal guidance system, effectively outsourcing their decision-making process to the perceived certainty of others. Very language we use to discuss personal growth can also inadvertently undermine the trust we place in our inner voice. Terms like self-discipline, willpower, and self-control, while valuable in certain contexts, can sometimes imply an adversarial relationship with our own impulses and desires. When our inner voice suggests rest, a change of pace, or a departure from a planned itinerary, these concepts can be easily framed as weaknesses to be overcome, rather than valid signals from our deeper psyche. Imagine an individual who, after a period of intense work, feels a profound inner pull towards a spontaneous act of creative exploration, perhaps to spend an afternoon painting or writing poetry without any specific goal in mind. If this impulse is immediately framed through the lens of losing focus or lack of discipline, the individual might suppress it, prioritizing the continuation of their preordained productive schedule. This constant suppression, born from a misapplication of self-management principles, can gradually erode the connection to the spontaneous, intuitive wisdom that often fuels genuine creativity and personal well-being. It's a subtle but significant shift, where the inner voice is not heard as a guide, but as a potential saboteur of external goals. Another critical aspect is the way our education systems, while vital for imparting knowledge, often prioritize the internalization of external facts and standardized methodologies over the cultivation of individual intuition and subjective experience. From an early age, we are taught to find the right answer, to adhere to established procedures, and to demonstrate our understanding through objective metrics. This can inadvertently train us to dismiss or devalue the validity of our own subjective knowing, the intuitive leaps and personal insights that don't fit neatly into predefined frameworks. Consider a student who, while studying history, feels a visceral emotional connection to a particular period or event that transcends the textbook's factual account. Their inner voice might offer a unique interpretation, a sense of the lived experience of those times that is not reflected in the curriculum. However, the pressure to conform to the expected academic response, to regurgitate established historical narratives, can lead the student to suppress this personal resonance. The risk here is not just a missed opportunity for deeper historical understanding, but a broader diminishment of the confidence in one's own capacity for original thought and personal interpretation, a gradual silencing of the inner voice in favor of externally validated knowledge. The challenge of heeding one's inner voice is intricately linked to our deeply ingrained patterns of seeking external validation, a phenomenon that often manifests subtly in our daily interactions and long-term aspirations. Consider how often we preface our own thoughts with qualifiers like, "I might be wrong, but ... or, "This is just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt." These linguistic habits, while seemingly polite, betray an underlying uncertainty about the inherent worth of our own perceptions, a learned deference to the perceived authority of others. When facing a critical personal decision, such as choosing a career path or making a significant relationship commitment, this tendency can lead us to solicit an overwhelming number of opinions, not necessarily to gather diverse perspectives, but to find one that mirrors our own nascent, often unarticulated, preference. The risk intensifies when this external consensus, once found, becomes the sole justification for our choice, effectively outsourcing the responsibility for our own life direction. Consequently, when difficulties inevitably arise, the internal blame is often directed outward at the advisors or the prevailing societal narrative, rather than at the failure to engage with and trust our own inner compass. This creates a cyclical pattern of dependency, where the inner voice remains underdeveloped, perpetually overshadowed by the chorus of external voices. Furthermore, the modern emphasis on quantifiable achievement and measurable outcomes can inadvertently create a disincentive for exploring the less tangible, more intuitive aspects of our inner lives. We are conditioned to value what can be logged, tracked, and reported, often overlooking the profound insights that emerge from periods of quiet contemplation or unstructured exploration. Imagine an individual who feels a persistent, almost magnetic pull towards mastering a craft that offers no clear economic advantage or social prestige, perhaps learning an obscure musical instrument or dedicating years to calligraphy. The external world, with its focus on career progression and tangible results, might perceive this pursuit as unproductive, even frivolous. The inner voice, however, whispers of a deep-seated satisfaction, a sense of alignment with something intrinsically meaningful. The risk lies in succumbing to the external pressure to optimize one's time, to reframe this intrinsic pursuit as a hobby to be squeezed into the margins, rather than acknowledging it as a vital expression of the self. This can lead to a gradual stifling of the very impulses that bring authentic joy and a sense of purpose, leaving one feeling professionally accomplished, but existentially unfulfilled. The very structure of societal feedback mechanisms can also contribute to the diminishment of our inner voice, particularly in how it rewards conformity and penalizes divergence. Think about the educational system, where standardized testing and predefined curricula often emphasize the assimilation of established knowledge over the development of independent thought. A student who consistently arrives at correct answers through unconventional reasoning might be overlooked, or even corrected, in favor of those who demonstrate a more rote adherence to the prescribed method. This can instill a subtle but pervasive fear of deviating from the norm, a learned helplessness regarding one's own unique approach to problem solving. Consequently, when faced with complex life choices that lack clear-cut answers, individuals may find themselves paralyzed by indecision, unable to trust the unique insights their inner voice might offer, because they have been conditioned to believe that only externally validated methods hold true value. This creates a profound disconnect, where the capacity for original thought and intuitive guidance remains dormant, unexercised, and ultimately underdeveloped, leaving individuals adrift in a sea of external directives. Reflecting on this journey, so far, we've traced the intricate contours of our inner landscape against the often deafening backdrop of the external world. We've considered the subtle yet persistent signals that emanate from within, signals that, when heeded, promise a more authentic engagement with life. Conceptualizing this inner voice not as a mere whisper, but as a profound, albeit often symbolic, form of communication from the deepest strata of our psyche, we've seen how its development is intrinsically tied to our own unfolding wholeness. The external world, with its insistent demands and pervasive narratives, often presents a formidable challenge to this internal dialogue, encouraging a diffusion of our attention and a reliance on externally validated frameworks. The implications of this internal calibration extend far beyond individual decision-making. They touch upon the very essence of how we construct meaning and inhabit our lives. The journey has illuminated the profound interconnectedness between our internal states and our external actions, suggesting that true authenticity arises not from a rejection of the world, but from a grounded and discerning engagement with it, guided by an unwavering fidelity to our own inner experience. The path forward, therefore, is not about silencing the world, but about amplifying the signal from within, allowing it to inform and shape our interaction with the external, imbuing our choices with a depth and integrity that resonates with our core being. This nuanced understanding sets the stage for a final contemplation on the courage and wisdom inherent in trusting that quiet, persistent voice. The true practice begins now, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, everyday moments of decision and perception. It is in the subtle inclination to pause rather than react, to question rather than accept, to feel rather than merely think. The world will continue to roar with its opinions, its demands, its endless stream of information, but within us lies the quiet, persistent hum of our own truth. To honor this hum, to allow it to inform our journey, is to embark on the most vital expedition of all the exploration and realization of our own unique self. This is not a destination to be reached, but a way of being, a continuous unfolding, a testament to the quiet power that resides within each of us, waiting to be heard.